Right. Good afternoon to everybody. It's our weekly Learn in Your Lunchtime webinar. And as all of you should be quite well aware of by now, here at the Student Success Coach, we are 100% dedicated to helping you succeed. And what we typically do on a Friday, every afternoon, 12 to 1, we go live, and either we have experts and leaders like Cathy Sims join us, or we touch on some coaching topics related to writing and other things like that. So if you've been in a couple of our sessions, you'll see that there's lots of value for you to get. And if you engage and take advantage of it, then it's certainly going to benefit you in your study. So as always, if you guys can drop a comment in the chat and just tell us which university you're from, it's always helpful for us to see which universities are sending their students to these events and are taking advantage of the value that you'll get from these sessions. And then obviously today, just get into some questions that you've got for Cathy specifically about graduate opportunities, specifically the events that are coming up, and then more generally about the graduate employment space here in South Africa. You're all studying and working hard, and that's important. We want you to succeed and get through your studies, but very importantly, we want to help you position yourself for the world of work out there. And I could think of no better person than Cathy Sims to join us from SAGEA and talk about it. So Cathy, we're going to get into all of those great things and initiatives that you've got lined up and the wonderful work that you're doing at SAGEA. But before we do that, just give us an introduction to yourself and your background and a little bit of the incredible work and passion that you are so involved with in this space. Cathy, welcome.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. So hi everyone, my name is Cathy. I have been working in the young talent space for far too long, when you know that my daughter's 30 years old. So, and I think I hired my first graduate in 1991. So that was my first graduate intake I ever did, working in corporate. So I've been doing this for a long, long time. And essentially what I've done in my life, I started off as a banker, working for a net bank. I really enjoyed it, but I decided I wanted to do a shift in my career and work more on the people side. So I did 4 years or 5 years in banking, and then made a shift over to human resources, where I could offer my interest in solving people problems. So I spent 12 years with a company called Accenture, responsible for the young talent programs. And Peter was one of the grads that I hired many years ago. No, actually, it was just 3 years ago. I think he was 22 then.
Very kind of you.
And then I had the joy and privilege, after I finished my stint in corporate, for want of a better word, of working for the University of Cape Town and looking after their career service. Did that for a couple of years. I now run SAGEA, which is a community of practice, professional association, for want of a better word. And we have 350 passionate talent managers and career managers that are in our community. And what my team and I do every day is help companies enhance their offerings to graduates, be it a corporate that wants to set up and run a graduate program, be it a university that is thinking about how do we successfully navigate our students in and out of university successfully, be it a foundation who is setting up a scholarship program, be it a solution provider who offers services to the market and how they connect with the market. So that's the community that I work in, and we do lots and lots of interesting stuff with our employers to ensure that no student is left behind, to help them reach their dreams as early as possible. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Fantastic. So, I mean, you're really creating the sort of marketplace between the universities and, these employers. And I mean, myself included, and everyone on this call today, the graduates and the students that sort of interact inside that marketplace really need to understand how it works, I guess, and need to understand, that there's a pipeline of graduates providing the supply of those skills and talent that we need in South Africa for us to be successful as a society. And then there's the demand. There's the corporates, there's the companies, all sizes, all shapes and forms and industries, that need those graduates as the talent pipeline for them to be successful in the future. So, Cathy, thank you for that. And I still remember our interview. I think, let's just be honest, that's at least 20 years ago, if I do the math, 25 years even. So come a long way since then. And as everyone knows, my background, obviously had a wonderful career at Accenture. And I finished my PhD, and then obviously now putting, my time and effort back into helping people. I think really with what I wished I'd had. So understanding of the marketplace and the work that SAGEA does, and then the coaching and the tips and the access to experts and leaders, like yourself and others that we've had on these webinars, really is sort of my driving passion. So, Cathy, just tell us then a little bit about, so obviously you spend a lot of time with the leaders and the organizations on both sides of this sort of graduate demand, supply, marketplace. What are the trends that you're seeing? And obviously we've had a tough year, 2020. What are the changes in the dynamics in the supply and demand between the universities and organizations? If you can give us a couple of themes that are coming through and that you as an organization are working hard to tap into and to take advantage of and help, students and organizations and universities alike. What are those themes? And then maybe that leads into a couple of the initiatives that you've got lined up for the next few months.
I think the two things that strike me, one is a positive and one is a negative. And let's start with the negative, because I think that can lead to the positive in terms of how we solve problems. So one of the things that I've been a little bit concerned about, particularly in the last 5 years, is the growing number of unemployed graduates. So if you look back 5 years ago, the graduate unemployment rate was around 8%. Now, with youth unemployment sitting at 40%, 8% doesn't sound bad. And it's certainly a good perspective saying, well, clearly it's obvious that if you study further, you have a much better chance of employment. But the worrying trend is that I'm seeing that number go up every year. And I don't know the total effect of COVID yet, but certainly at the end of last year, it was sitting at 8%. If you strip out and say, well, okay, graduate unemployment is sitting at 8%, but what does that mean for a 22 to 25-year-old? It's much higher. And that is because of the lack of experience in getting into the market. If you look at a 42-year-old who has experience and a graduate, that is almost zero. So, age and experience has a lot to do with this. So graduate unemployment is a worrying factor for us. It really, really is. Now, who and what is unemployed is the big question. So what are the graduates that are unemployed? Is it a discipline issue? In other words, there's a lack of demand in chemical engineering at this moment. And therefore an oversupply anyway. Is it I wish more students would study accounting because there's a shortage there at the moment? The problem really is you can't study something because of demand. And I'll give you an example. I spoke to a journalist the other day, and she was saying to me, I'm writing a piece for X newspaper, and I want to know what are the key things that students should be studying. And I said, well, okay, let's just step back before we get into that. You're a journalist, right? She said, yes. I said, do you love your job? She said, I love my job. I'm so grateful. I said, so if your parents or I, as your careers advisor, said, that's all very well that you want to do journalism and you love it, but actually there's no demand, go and study chartered accounting, what would you say to me? She said, I'd rather pull my nails out than be a chartered accountant. And I said, that's the point. Please don't go to newspapers and say, what is the demand? Because there are three things that students need in order to actually be successful in their career. One is they actually need to be good at something. So don't try and be a chartered accountant when you're just not good at accounting. The second thing is, and I'll give you an example of this actually, if you are talented at something, and let's take that accounting story further. Let's say you're good at chartered accounting, but you're not particularly that interested in it. So, for example, I was told in my early career, I'm very good at sales. I can't stand it. So every day was a mission for me to sell. I really didn't enjoy it, you know. The third part is around kind of, so you're good at, you're passionate about, and you're going to get paid for it. Because that's the third thing. Otherwise, what are you doing? Well, if no one's going to pay you for your passion, then it's just a hobby. That's all it is. So I really worry about kind of market demands and supply. So I would advise anybody who's studying something, if you're good at and you're passionate about, that will reflect in your marks. That'll get you an interview and get you the job, even though the jobs are limited. But please don't go and do something and live someone else's dream, the dream of your parents or the dream of your school teacher or something like that, because you will pay dearly for this. Because you will end up, I met an actuarial scientist last week, a black female from a top university who is unemployed because she did finish her actuarial degree, but she scraped through every year and had to do an extra year. No one's interested. And
because of the marks.
Because of the mark. And the sad thing that I'm going to tell you is that I remember an investment bank once saying to me when I checked them on why are your requirements for marks so high, they said to me, I can't introduce this new graduate to my client and say, here's Joe, he only gets things 50% right.
Okay.
So you know what, if you want to be an investment banker, then you best come with top marks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, or a doctor. You don't want a doctor, getting, doctor's got to, I mean, it's your life, right?
Exactly. So, whilst there is demand and supply, that, imbalances, don't go and study something because the market demand is there. Because you know what? In 3 years' time, that market demand will change. So that's my worry.
Yeah.
My learning and my happiness for this is, we often used to get employers saying to us, we're really struggling to meet our equity targets. And I say to them, okay, well, where do you go and recruit from? And they were typically visiting traditionally research-led universities. So, the UCTs, Rhodes, Wits, UP. And I'd say, well, what about this university? What about that university? Well, a little bit worried about quality. Do you know that UWC is in the top 5% of universities in the world?
Okay.
So is UFS. UCT is in the top 1% of universities in the world. So I don't know what all this rubbish is about, I only go to these universities. This is not Ivy League in South Africa. This is a different reality. We go and study where we can afford to. So, I come from the Eastern Cape, and I always use this example. I have many friends whose kids say, Mom, I want to go to UCT or I want to go to UP. And they say, sure. And they get in. In other words, they meet the criteria. But the reality is, if you're a parent, the difference of going to UCT or UP compared to being at home and staying at Nelson Mandela University, as an example, is the difference between 20,000 and 3,000 Rand a month. The average middle-class person cannot afford that. They don't have 20,000 Rand after they've paid all their bills a month. And it's not, yes, UCT is expensive, but it's accommodation, transport, allowances, this, that, it's all the other stuff. So good quality candidates are everywhere. What COVID has taught us is that virtually, we don't have to leave anyone behind. So I'll give you an example. Last year, we ran a virtual grad expo, a career fair, because many of the universities were caught, without budgets, without resources, and didn't have the capability to move from a traditional career fair to a virtual environment. Because we are a community of mostly employers, we were able to very quickly say, well, we will pay for it. Bring your students. We had 40,000 students at our virtual grad expo last year. Wow. From every single university in the country. No one was left behind. No one had to be left behind because it was a free service for students. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. So I'm really excited because it's opened up and changed people's perspectives around diversity and inclusion. So we've all been focused on diversity or equity as organizations, but I don't think we actually are inclusive. And I'm really excited about the opportunity that brings us because of this new and emerging way of doing things, and that we don't have to fly to Durban, drive to Richards Bay, get a hotel for the night, drive down to, Zululand University, 4 days out of the office, etc., just to see one cohort of students. We can do this virtually at our desk, on our phone, etc., etc.
It's leveled everything.
Exactly. And I'm really excited about this, finally, because you would know, Peter, the joy of working for a technology company like Accenture is that no matter whether you're a technologist or you work in HR, you're not scared of technology anymore. So I'll try anything new.
Fantastic. Cathy, I want to talk about your initiatives and events that are coming up, and you mentioned the virtual Grad Expo, and there's Quantify Your Future and a couple of others. But before we get there, let's answer a couple of questions that we've got from people. So Busi says, and we're just also recording this for the podcast, so I'm going to read it out. Hi, Cathy, I'm from University of Pretoria. I have an honors and currently doing my master's, and she doesn't say, in what field, etc. But any advice for students who graduated in this unfortunate time?
Thanks, Busi. The interesting thing is we did what we call a COVID snap check every 3 months last year. It is an unfortunate time. It has impacted some industries quite badly. Fortunately, most fortunately, I would say, the industries that have been less impacted typically hire graduates. So, during COVID, banks were still running. Retailers were still selling clothes. Yes, online, but they were still selling clothes. The only unfortunate thing was, colleagues like South African breweries and Distil were not necessarily operating and selling alcohol. But, they're coming back, and they're coming back strong. The industries that were impacted actually affected more those that were not fortunate to go to university and become a knowledge worker. And that's the important part. What university gives you is the ability to consume and demonstrate your understanding of knowledge and how you can apply that knowledge and theory into an organization. And your undergraduate, yes, that's a wonderful experience. It's your foundation. But your honors and your masters is where you really, really come to the fore, because now you're starting to form your own opinion of stuff, of your discipline. You're starting to fight your view of that discipline. You're starting to produce new information in that discipline, and you're contributing to the future knowledge of our country. So I'm a huge fan of postgraduate study. Not only for the person that you become, but for the experience that you go through.
Absolutely, Cathy, and I say it so many times. I think, the big problems of the world are going to be solved by, at the core of it, good academic research, which is then applied into industry to solve those problems by competent, capable people that are able to bridge the academic world and the theory development practices that we have embedded in our research methodologies with the industrial needs, where those problems have to be solved and where they then can create value. And that's why I'm so passionate about this world of bridging, the world of the masters and the honors, like Busi's been talking about, and maybe she feels she's sort of getting into that, but then to lift up and get into events like what you organized and get into expos and talk to employers and engage with them. And as you say, it's so much easier now, and with the great work that SAGEA is doing, to then connect in with those networks and get those opportunities and position yourself and ready yourself for the world of work. Now, Cathy, you mentioned, knowledge workers, and obviously I'm in banking. I know a lot of knowledge work there and very services-based organization, and we certainly were able to pivot in COVID. But just want to talk about Kuchle's question here, doing logistics. Now, obviously, trucking and retail and physical goods and manufacturing and engineering, and where there are physical supply chains, and he's doing logistics. And as the world opens up, I think we'll see those logistics supply chains kicking in again. But just your advice for Kuchle specifically, who says, I'm good at logistics, but I'm not really passionate about it. The only thing stopping me from changing is that I've come this far already. What do you say to Kuchle?
It's a really good question, and it's an important question. It depends where you are in the process. So if you're in first year, I'm happy to take an offline conversation with you around how you make change to that. If you're in third year, get it finished and go and look at what postgraduate opportunities there are to transition. So, for example, my daughter did an undergraduate in humanities because she wanted to work in media. By the time she got to the end of media, she actually realized that she wasn't as passionate about it as she thought she was. And the TV programs that she was watching, thinking that, my life is going to be around working at Cosmopolitan, blah, 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 is not the reality. And what she did was pivot and do a postgraduate in management. And there are, I know of two that I personally would recommend. One is the management one at UCT, which is what my daughter did. And the second one is the one at Wits Business School. They have an excellent, in fact, one of my staff members is a PDM from Wits as well. They are excellent pivot courses. And when I say pivot, they did finance, they did marketing, it was like a baby MBA. But through that, and she's good at accounting, but not fascinated or interested in it. But she's really good at numbers, but she has this thing about fashion. She is now, 5 years later, a fashion buyer, a sneaker buyer, dream job.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, go and figure out when you say, I'm not really passionate about it, that's fine. But what are you passionate about? And how do you connect the dots and connect the ways to do things? What you study and what you are 10 years later often has nothing to do with each other. I will tell you that, okay, granted, I had quite a bit of privilege and I went to a good school and I had money to go and study. My understanding of I want to work with people was tourism. So off I went to the old, what is now CPUT, to study tourism, travel and tourism. I realized after 2 years, not passionate about this. Definitely not interested in working nights and weekends. Not for this kind of money. So what I did was I said, okay, well then how do I very quickly pivot? And my pivot was, well, I was good at accounting in school and the banks were prepared to hire anyone who understood maths or accounting. And I started on my graduate program at Nedbank, and they gave me an opportunity and taught me credit management. And I worked in credit for 3 years.
Fantastic.
I then moved to IT for 2 years. You know what I mean? So you need to understand that who you are and what you're studying is not what you will become. But how do you take the talent you have and transition that into something else?
And I think that leads brilliantly into our next question here from Senamelia. But before we do that, my example was that I studied mechanical engineering, had a bursary at Eskom. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to study either. But now I've ended up in sort of IT and digital transformation and consulting. And once again, as you say, the banks understood that the engineering discipline you learned could actually be applied to much more than just mechanical, industrial, electrical, chemical, and that in actual fact, as I was explaining to somebody the other day, large organizations of today are like complex adaptive systems. And engineers are taught to think in a systems mindset. And we can understand whether it's the components of an engine or a power station or the components of a large organization. If you can understand how all those fit together to optimize the overall performance of the greater system, there's a role for you to play. And all I had to do,
No, I'm saying exactly. And I mean, that's why I pivoted from tourism, working with people, to work at a bank, working with people, to solving people problems. And I've never studied a day of HR in my life. What I did do, but that's just my insecurity, was, when I moved into HR, I phoned a mate and said, you studied HR, can I have all your all your theory, all your books that you
Correct.
had to read in first,
Correct.
second, and third year, and I read them from beginning to end. So I could
Amazing.
sit in a meeting and know the theory, but I didn't write the exam to say I know the theory.
And I mean, just on to Senamela's question there, because what I liked so much about what you're saying was this idea of the pivot and the adaptability to get that core knowledge, get that degree, but recognize that it may not define your career path and that you must be open and willing to those opportunities as they come your way. So Senamela says, I felt I wasted 3 years of my life doing accounting degree, something I wasn't even passionate about. So Senamela, look, there's many that are in that situation. I think Cathy has touched on that. I've given my example. She's talked about her daughter. But Cathy, for Senamela, what are the options in your network of graduate employers for people that have an accounting degree, perhaps aren't passionate about it, but are willing to pivot and willing to adapt and adopt and help, those organizations to be successful? Can we help Senamela today?
Two awesome examples. First of all, remember working for a bank, you had to know a lot about accounting, financial statements, etc., etc. I remember my first client when I was a credit manager was the Fushini Group. They're a huge company. I was so scared for my first meeting. I was petrified. And they wanted an overnight loan of X million, and it was the late 80s. I was petrified because I felt like I was out of my depth. Fast forward to my time at Accenture, 6 years down the line and 5 years in banking. I was the only HR manager who could read a financial statement. I was the only HR manager who could get her budgets approved. I am the only person that I know who works in a business now with an HR background that can fight big budgets and big management accounts and that. So I felt when I was 25 that I'd wasted my time and all my friends had moved ahead and I was losing out. But I'm so grateful for that experience. I'm so grateful for that learning, because your accounting degree will never, ever be a waste. It will never, ever be a waste. Yep. I also remember once I was doing a workshop at one of the big audit firms. The students need to do a 3-year articles. And I do a workshop for this firm every year around the transition that you now make from chartered accountants to what next. And actually the workshop I run is called Should I Stay or Should I Go? So you know how the model works with chartered accounting. You all go and do your articles, and at the end of the article, some people stay and some people go. And I asked the group of students that I was working with, if you had no expectations in life, expectation of salary, expectation of parent, expectation of, you didn't have to work for the money, what would you really want to be? And this one girl said, I just want to be a fashion designer. So I said, well, why are you sitting here? She said, because I'm a good Muslim girl and my daddy said to me, no, there's no such career as a fashion designer. If there's no security in that, you will go and study to do chartered accounting and you will go to this university because that's the way you'll get a job. And she said, so here I am, 4 years business science, 1 year GDA, 3 years articles, 8 years later, so the same time that it takes to be a doctor. And I got no interest. Yeah. And I said, well, let's talk about transition. Have you ever heard of a merchandise planner? She said, no. And I pulled out, fortunately, I had one on my laptop. I pulled out a job spec for a merchandise planner, but I deleted the title and I put the key KPAs and the degree. The requirements for a merchandise planner is, in fact, an accounting degree.
Right.
Or something quantitative. So I know somebody, by the way, who has stats, who's a merchandise planner. Your job as a merchandise planner is to do forecasting and help the organization understand what to get to the right shop, the right place at the right time through long-term. It's all forecasting and budgeting.
Yep. Cathy, wonderful.
Environment.
Yep, fantastic. So I think we must just encourage Senamela there to keep going, get that accounting degree if you haven't finished it yet, but then anticipate a bit of a pivot,
Yes.
either to position yourself or to network accordingly and talk to people like Cathy and others in the industry to see where that's going to lead you. And it might be very different from what you'd originally anticipated, while holding on to what it is that you become more passionate about over time. Because I also think, Cathy, that what we think we're passionate about 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, or what our parents have told us we should be passionate about, also there is some change that can happen with that. Cathy, I just want to change tack quickly, and I'm desperate to talk about your events coming up, but there's such good questions coming through from the students. So this one is on Lola. How do you solve the lack of experience? So now just talking about actually getting that job, and when, as you said earlier, employers are asking for experience, how do you make yourself attractive to employers when you haven't had a chance to do things like extracurricular activities? How do you stand out?
That's a good question, and it is a challenge in South Africa where demand and supply is out of kilter. Having said that, you have vacations. So even if nobody calls you into an interview and says, "I see you did this and this and this. Did you get paid or not?" The point I'm trying to make is whether you do something for an income or whether you volunteer for nothing, it is experience. It is extracurricular activity. So volunteer where you can and where you have time. Get involved, seek out opportunities, whether that be through your career service or through connecting with professional bodies or through connecting with employers. Find any experience you can get. And if you can't get it, volunteer yourself for that experience. And I understand, some of you are working, studying, doing all that sort of thing, but you are getting extracurricular activities. The trick is, what you need to do is, not only do you need a degree, and this is what differentiates students who have no experience. What you need to do is you need to understand that when employers come to me and say, "Let me tell you about the perfect graduate," they will say, "I'm looking for somebody who can solve problems," not identify problems. We can all identify, the problem is. People who can solve problems. People who can critically think through a problem creatively. And, I always get nervous with the word creatively because I think, I'm not creative. But creativity is about options. Here's a problem. What options do you have? And what are you going to do about it? The third thing is about collaboration. Can you work with people? And can you work with different people to yourself? And the fourth is about communication. Can you convince people? So think about, have you got evidence that you've taken on responsibility? It could be at home looking after your siblings. Have you got evidence that you can work in a team? Whether it's in retail, being a salesperson, or at MacD, or whatever the case may be, working with people to achieve a result. Can you solve problems? Have you critically engaged with your discipline that you're in? So what they do is they say, I want somebody who can critically think, who's creative, who's collaborative, who can communicate with a degree in.
Okay.
Material science, masters, whatever. That's what you need to be thinking about. So, that lack of experience is one thing, but there are ways to get extracurricular activities into your bucket before you join the world of work. The second thing that I would say is there are hundreds of employers out there who run entry-level graduate programs. They don't expect you to have experience. It's an entry-level program to train you. So it depends where you're looking, because if you're looking at the newspapers for jobs, they don't advertise there. If you're looking at, I don't know, on a job board, let's say Career Junction, they don't advertise for graduates there. They advertise for graduates on where graduates are looking for jobs. And that is university career portals, the university career social media, if they can't afford portals, graduateemployers.co.za, leap.ly, Student Village, and that's based on the research. Every year we do research and we say, where are graduates finding jobs? LinkedIn, 70% of graduates are now on LinkedIn. So that's where employers go. So
I mean, that's such brilliant insights, and hopefully people are taking notes and they're going to take action, straight after the session. And as you were talking, I just was triggered in my mind of a couple of courses, and I've made them available for free to students today on the chat. And the first one was how to improve your job prospects and accelerate your career growth. Because in there, I teach them how to set up a CV, how to attend an interview, how to, brand themselves for their employer. And then as you talk about LinkedIn, how to go and look for jobs on LinkedIn, and how to position your LinkedIn profile so that you can attract, because as you say, employers are on LinkedIn and actively recruiting on LinkedIn for the type of skills that people have available today. All they need to do is, cross that bridge of positioning themselves better and getting out there and into the places where people are looking. And then I love your point around communications. We had Bubu Bana last year, who runs the Job Box, who's a sort of a gig economy contract work type of platform for students. And I also asked him, and he said communication, communication, communication. So that's another of my recently released courses that I've made available to there. So Cathy, there's some brilliant questions. I think let's come back to them if we've got time, but I really just want to dive in now to your events, the SAGEA events that you've got coming up. So just, talk us through those. And I'm just going to stick just a summary of those up on the screen as well, so that people can see what that's all about. And over to you just to talk about, those events that are coming up and the value to students, that they can get from being part of those in the context of some of these challenges and opportunities that we've been speaking about.
Thanks. So yeah, the first, May to July is probably the worst time of my life, because none of us get very much sleep. But in May and July, we are running the virtual Grad Expos. So that is available to all students in South Africa who are looking for entry-level graduate opportunities. They also are available for those of you that are looking for vacation work and looking for bursaries. So that's the first thing. What I will do is I will send a link of how to register as a student. I think what you've got there is potentially the employer link, but how to register as a student. I'm happy to post that up afterwards. That's
Please,
the first.
Cathy.
So that happens, as you said, that happens in May and July. The other two initiatives is through our Quantify Your Future. Quantify Your Future is really about new and emerging careers. It's about showcasing new opportunities in the world of work. So I'll give an example. Many people say, well, how do humanities come to life and transition themselves as graduates into the corporate world? Well, think about this. Every single company is thinking about, how do we solve customer issues? Is the social scientist not the king of behavior? That's what they're studying. Be it a sociologist, be it an anthropologist, or whatever, they are thinking about behavior and culture and the psychology of. So, for example, in some organizations, they have what they call behavioral economists or behavioral scientists. They have data scientists. They have all sorts of new and emerging careers happening. And that is really to showcase those new and emerging careers. So with our sponsors, who you've seen on the screen, we are doing two things. One is an innovation showcase around what work is being done in new and emerging careers in organizations. And that's for final year students and postgraduates. And then we also have a virtual internship coming online in July. And we're offering 1,000 students the opportunity who are second-year students of a 3-year program or third-year students of a 4-year program, the ability to go and experience for 2 weeks what it's like to be a quantitative scientist. So those are the three big projects we've got coming up. We're super excited. What the virtual world has taught us because of COVID is that we can scale. That's the one thing. And we can reach people that we never have been able to reach before. So we're super excited about these initiatives. And if you want to, obviously, no doubt people post up some of our social media stuff. But if you want to follow us on social media, all the information is on Quantify Your Future and SAGEA. So do follow us.
Cathy, that's fantastic. And maybe if I could ask you just to grab that link quickly and pop that in our private chat here in the studio. while I just respond to a couple of the questions here, because I'd like to pop that onto the chat now. In all my webinars, everybody knows that I'm very action orientated. So I really want people to take advantage of these opportunities while they're thinking about it. People step off the webinar and it's Friday afternoon. So I really want them to take action. So Cathy, if you can grab that link, I'm just going to leave the Quantify Your Future webpage up there just as a prompt for people to take action. And I'm going to just have a look at, there was a great question here from, it was Leon. And Leon says, so very, obviously I can answer this question because I did mechanical engineering. So Leon, just for the benefit of the podcast listeners, people who can't read what's on the screen now, and Cathy, you're going to grab that link for us quickly for students to register for those events. And I think, Cathy, very important, that virtual one, the virtual internship where you're going to take 1,000 students. If you could just grab those links or whatever, that'd be great in the meantime. And Leon says, hi, Cathy, I'm busy with masters in mechanical engineering. I'm often told that overqualification can be a problem. What is your thoughts about this? Kind regards. Okay, Leon, so let me open up 100% here. I did a mechanical engineering at WITS. I was passionate about it. I was passionate about the way that it taught me. I was passionate about the skills that it gave me. But the reality is I've never practiced as a mechanical engineer. I also did a master's in mechanical engineering. But the beauty of that master's particularly was that it was only 50% research in mechanical engineering. And the other 50% of it was in a range of finance and HR and innovation and legal. And, a couple of other things, like Cathy said, gave me sort of a mini MBA. And I wouldn't advise doing an MBA straight after your undergraduate studies. You really need to do an MBA after you've got some experience. But that, for me, gave me the perfect blend of still doing some research in mechanical engineering, but then spreading my wings across the other areas. Now, Leon, fast forward 20 years, I've gone and done my PhD in engineering. And I can honestly say that, did my master's and my PhD give me a measurable improvement in my employment prospects or my career growth? I don't think so. And I say that because I don't emphasize the letters or the piece of paper it gave me. I emphasize what I learned from doing those things. I emphasize the way that it changed me as an individual. And if nobody ever knew that I got a master or a PhD, it wouldn't bother me at all. And yes, I put it on my CV and it's on my LinkedIn profile. But if I go for an interview today, and remember, just because I've been in an organization for 10 years, it doesn't mean to say that as I move around and do different jobs, I'm not still going for interviews and need to position myself and keep my CV updated. So this idea of getting into an organization and then sitting pretty for the next 10 years, that's over. That world of work has changed. So you're constantly positioning yourself. You're constantly, convincing people to take you into roles and projects, but on the basis of how you can contribute, not what the degrees and the papers and the letters that you've got behind your name. There could be some minimum criteria for you to get in. And I think, Liam, to your point there about overqualification, when you have this expectation that those additional letters and degrees, just ratchet up your salary earning potential, that's then I think where you get into the overqualification space. But if you see those extra degrees as the pivots, that Cathy has spoken about, and the extra learning for you to do, and the one thing that I would say is if you do, masters and PhD and postgraduate qualifications, try and do them part-time. I know it's tough. I know it's hard. It's late nights, it's weekends, it's sacrifice, but it keeps you in the world of work. It keeps you current. Now, do your full-time undergraduate degree, then, use Cathy's organization, join these events, get into the world of work. I've posted a couple of links there on courses where I teach you how to position yourself for employers, and then, start adding to those degrees as you want to, not with the expectation of improving your salary and your promotional prospects, etc., but for the improvement that it gives you as an individual. So Cathy, from my perspective as a mechanical engineer, that's my thoughts to Leon. I don't know if you've got anything else to add, and I see you've posted the links there, so I'll pop the links on while you give Leon some perspectives from your point of view.
Thanks. I want to just use an example here. When you say overqualified, the question I would have is for what? Because I would not have someone, and again, it goes to the story of the doctor. If you are going to be designing cars, I want somebody with a master's who's designing cars. I don't want someone with a 2-year diploma. I want somebody who is a master of mechanical engineering. So I remember a student once saying to me, I keep on being told I'm overqualified. And this was in fact a PhD. And I said, overqualified for what? And she said, Well, for many positions, I said, give me one example of where somebody has told you you're overqualified. So she brought a job spec. So I looked at the job spec and I looked at her and I said, do you think you're overqualified? So she said, well, what do you mean? I said, this is the job. Can you do that? Can you do that? Can you do that? And she said, of course I can. I said, but just your behavior tells me that you're overqualified because you're saying, I can do the sleeping. Well, then why would you do it? Go and look for a stretch job then. You're looking in the wrong places again. So, it's super important to think about if you are going to be solving complex problems for organizations, particularly in investment banking, in management consulting, etc. Masters is a minimum. One of the banks I know doesn't look at anybody who doesn't have an honors. So, I'm sorry, I just don't buy that overqualified. I really don't. My question would be overqualified for what? Because then you're applying to the wrong job. If you're overqualified for an entry-level job for McDonald's, yes, you are. But do you really actually want to do that?
Yeah, that's the stepping stone, as you say, to get the experience and to demonstrate, the ability to hold down a job and to collaborate and communicate, but you're moving on to to higher and higher levels, etc. Sofiso asks, I'm a final year student at University of Pretoria doing BCom informatics. What are possible graduate programs that I can participate in? What should I do in order for the companies to recognize me? So Cathy, if you can answer that question. And guys, I put the 3 links in the chat that Cathy has sent through to me. So go and check those websites out, go and register for those things. And as we are highly virtualized now in this post-COVID world, take advantage. You've got the world at your fingertips. It's a click of a button away. Those barriers to entry have been taken away. And Cathy and the great work that SAGEA is doing helps you. And through the session, you now have access to those things, or at least more information about them. Cathy, your thoughts on Sofiso's question here?
Sofiso, I could probably, not right now, but I could probably give you 80 companies that would be interested in talking to you. 80. That are looking for BCom informatics graduates for next year. What you need to do is you need to, go to your careers office, speak to Michelle and the team there, and find out which companies are registered there on their portal that are looking for graduates from Pretoria with BCom informatics. So that's your first list. Your second list is go on to graduateemployers.co.za, and we have a search function where you can actually go and click on I'm studying informatics. We've literally got every single major available in South Africa, and it'll come up with a list. Now, granted, our list is not yet up to date for this year because some of our employers are still planning their recruiting for next year. So I don't have the perfect list, but I promise you by the end of July I will. I do hope that you will register at our career fair. We are having just one pavilion or one floor of just companies looking for tech graduates or informatics or computer science. So there are plenty out there. How do they notice you? Well, I've explained that before. I hope you've worked hard at university to demonstrate that you get things right more than 50% of the time. I hope that you can communicate effectively. I hope that you have worked hard with other people and know that in the world of work, you will never do something alone. You will always do something with other people. And the fact that you've done informatics tells me that you probably had to critically engage, otherwise you wouldn't get a degree in informatics. So I hope that's helpful.
Wonderful, Cathy. And just as you were talking, I was reminded of your point right at the beginning of our chat about how important those marks are. So I've just put another link to a course which is free for everybody to access today called the Student Success Masterclass, 6 steps to complete your degree. And really what I do is unpack in my own perspective, in my own academic journey, what were those critical building blocks to maximize the chances of graduating with the best possible marks and outcomes to position yourself in the world of work. Now, Cathy, we sort of 10 minutes left and running out of time a bit, but Annalisa then says, hi, I'm currently completing my final year in BA Public Management and Governance at UJ. I was wondering what kind of jobs I can get with this degree and what work experience would add value to it.
Okay. This is an interesting one because I often get this with economists as well. I'm studying economics. What can I do with this degree? Well, there's the first part, and that is, do you choose to be an economist or do you choose to work in public management? So you must have chosen this degree in public management, I'm assuming, because you have a deep interest in offering your skills to the state to manage the public connection with the state, be that in governance, be that in property management, be that whatever you work in. So my husband, for example, again, like Pete, is an engineer, but he's head of property services for the state. So he manages all the leases on behalf of the city of Cape Town, right? So he's always worked for the state in public management. It really depends what you want to do. So the first thing is, I'm assuming you studied public management because you actually want to work for government. So what you've got to do is find out what programs are available in government that you can contribute in public management and governance. If you're asking what else can I do, then what you want to think about is, how do you take public management and pivot that? Well, the next thing that you can do is say, well, who interacts with government so that I understand how to support them? So, for example, I have a friend who works for a big oil company, and he has a public management degree, and he works in what is called corporate citizenship. It's the corporate affairs, some people call it. It's the interaction between state and business. So there are programs like that, often at big oil companies, often in retail, not retail, consumer goods companies like a Unilever. And I can't think of all of them now, but hopefully that gives you some sense.
Yeah, I think, Cathy, the important thing that you're saying there for me is that, when we go down a career path, be careful of boxing companies or industries, and recognize the breadth of skills that they require in that organization to cover the range of things that they need to have a talent pipeline available to manage and to operate and to perform. And I guess, in banking, our sort of economists in our banking, that sort of financial acumen and industry knowledge, but we still hire more developers than some of the big tech companies, for example.
Exactly.
FirstRand hires doctors in our wellness program, for example. We hire public management and governance experts because we've got, as you say, those public affairs committees, and we engage with the state extensively. So I think the important thing,
public management graduates into consulting, because we used to consult the government in strategy and process.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just quickly, Dirk asks, good day. I'm doing my honors degree in chemical engineering process design. I have a high interest in process design, simulation, optimization. Which type of companies would you recommend? Any thoughts there?
Okay, that's a good one. First of all, chemical engineering is a real struggle at the moment, that I will say to you. The demand for chemical engineers has declined over the last couple of years because there isn't investment in that area right now in South Africa, but there is in the States. So, for example, there's more graduate recruitment happening in SASL in the States than there is in South Africa. I'm not saying that they're not hiring graduates in South Africa. They are, but they're hiring more graduates in the States at the moment than in South Africa. But the point that you're making, which is important, is process design, simulation, optimization. Well, every company is looking to redesign their processes to optimize their business. So actually, any company, Nestle is looking to optimize. The banks are looking to optimize. Unilever is looking to optimize. Toyota is looking to optimize. So again, I can give you a list. And this is the point. Do not look for jobs in chemical engineering. Look for jobs in the words that interest you. Process design, simulation, optimization. There is so many opportunities in that area. So guys, stop looking at job spec titles and look at job content. So for me, that job content is about fixing, organizing, planning. That's what I love to do. I can do it for anyone. For anyone.
Definitely.
Definitely. That's what I look for. I don't look for a job title anymore. I look at those.
Yeah. And my advice to Dirk would be, 100% the same. And if you really were passionate about retaining some aspect of that chemical engineering work, then, as I said earlier, do a part-time master's, and no one has to know about it. It's a chemical engineering master's on chemical engineering is not going to advance you at first rand, for example, but optimizing processes. I can tell you, we are hiring process engineers. We're hiring people who can simulate operations so that we can automate them and put robots on them and artificial intelligence and all the rest of it. So that optimization piece, you'll never take advantage of technology. And I teach this in my digital masterclass. You can never take advantage of technology unless you fix your process, unless you fix the way that you actually run your business.
I also have an example of an honors student at UCT who studied chemistry, couldn't find a job in chemistry, but joined the Reckitt Benckiser, now known as Reckitt, graduate program. And 7 years later, she works in Atlanta in the US in their labs doing chemistry because they noticed her interest in that area. So
fantastic.
Don't be short term about your thinking as well.
Definitely. And guys, I put a couple of links in the chat there just so that you can take, ongoing advantage of everything that's available through the Student Success Coach. And what I do is I go and pick up all the questions that we don't get to in the webinar, and I release videos on those. And I may defer some of them to Cathy to help me with, but we certainly aren't going to forget about the extra questions that we just haven't had the time to get to this morning or this afternoon. We've got a few minutes left. Noxolo asks similar question to previously. I have a BA in psychology. So it's lovely that we're touching all these different we've had engineering, we've had accounting, we've had psychology now. So Cathy, help Noxolo here with a BA in psychology, doing an honors. I'm good with my career path, but I need some part-time job. What kind of entry jobs can I apply for?
Great. Hi, Noxolo. What I think is important to understand, and I can't see that here, is what kind of psychology. So there's education psychology, there's industrial psychology, there's career psychology, there's all sorts of psychologies. It depends. If you're wanting to work in clinical psychology, you have to do an internship in the healthcare sector. If you want to do industrial psychology, many corporates have opportunities for internships in their organizations. And if you go onto SIOPSA's website, SIOPSA, which is the Society for Industrial and Organizational Psychology, you can pick it up there. If you're studying educational psychology, an educational psychologist, I can't remember their professional body, but they can help you. Now, each one of these organizations have internships because you have to do that internship to get your experience and therefore register with the Health Profession Council. You have to, if you want to be a psychologist, that is. Then you have to do your master's because that's the minimum requirement to be a psychologist, and then your 3-year internship or 2-year, I forget, depending on which one. So there is a process, and your lecturer should be able to guide you and help you. If you get stuck, go onto my website, drop me an email, I'll help you with that. Where do you get experience? For all those organizations, approach them, and if they say, sorry, I've got no budget, then say, then I'll volunteer for you.
So we've got Tabang, who said, just for the benefit of people listening, quite informative and motivational. Thanks, Tabang, for joining today. He says, I'm a mechanical engineering student, and from what I gained today, I'm pivoting to electrical because it's something that I love. Okay, well, look, Tabang, I mean, don't make rash decisions. We certainly don't want you, as Cathy advised earlier, sometimes there is some wisdom in just completing the path that you're on, but it might be that, electrical is something that you add into the way that you want to contribute, value and develop a career in your future. And in actual fact, I did mechanical engineering, but my PhD was technically in the electrical engineering faculty because that's where the information engineering is housed. Exactly. So I went through a similar pivot. Cathy?
No, I'm just saying, don't forget there's things like mechatronics, which is the connection between mechanical and electronic.
Yeah. And then just to finish off with, looking forward and excited to the upcoming opportunities for our students. So Cathy, I think it's been such an exciting and interesting discussion with you today, which I'm so grateful for. And we've provided all the links to everybody. And I wish you absolutely everything the best with, as you say, a very busy few months coming up, but you've been in that seat now for so many years and you are such a leader in the industry, and it's been such a privilege to have an hour of your time. Cathy, last thoughts from yourself, but thank you very much for being with us today.
I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure. And, I'm I'm so happy to to offer advice and to connect people and to support students in this process. It is difficult because right at the beginning, you don't know what you don't know yet, and you're going to learn so much. But treat everything as an experience, because it just adds those wonderful layers on of experiences that will lead you to finding your purpose, and understand that your purpose changes. So what I wanted to do when I was in my 20s, and Peter will relate to this, is I wanted to earn a lot of money because I wanted capital very quickly. I wanted to have a beautiful house, so I needed more money, even more money. I'd never had the opportunity to travel the world, so I went to work for an international management consulting company so I could travel as much as I could on someone else's expense. And I wanted challenging, interesting work. Fast forward 10 years, I didn't want to work in management consulting because I couldn't do those kinds of hours with a little child. I couldn't, I traveled. I'd done the travel. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to work with challenging and interesting people and solve real problems. So I went to work for a university.
Yeah,
And
fantastic.
Yes, I earned less. But that
Followed
was
your
fine.
passion.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Cathy, thank you so much. And I think just very importantly, guys, I put the link there for our Facebook group, because that's where we have the community of the Student Success Coach. And once again, in that very safe community of the members only Facebook group, you can bounce ideas off each other. You can get mentors. You can support each other with these questions and ideas. And I'll also post a lot of the information about SAGEA and the events that are coming up into the Facebook group, Cathy. So that's then where I'll sort of, convey more information and updates about what's coming. So Cathy, thank you very much for your time. We've had some incredibly positive comments coming back from everybody, which is always just very positive to see. And Tabang, absolute pleasure. Thanks, Cathy and Coach. That's really what we're trying to do here. It's our commitment to your success. So Cathy, thank you. Have a super weekend ahead. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll be in touch soon. Cheers, everybody. Bye-bye.